This is Mount Kilimanjaro. Topping it at a whopping 19,340 feet, it is the tallest mountain in Africa. Now this would be a challenge for any mountaineer to climb, let alone somebody without legs.
And we found someone who actually did that challenge. Let's go to Georgia and meet Kyle Maynard. How you doing, Kyle?
Hey, Kyle.
Hey, Gunnar. Nice to meet you.
So, Kyle, you were born with a rare condition called congenital amputation. Can you explain what that is?
So congenital amputation is basically, it's a condition that I was born with. Doctors don't really know what caused it, but it's basically where you just have like a shortened limb of some sort. So it could be sometimes a finger or toe. To have 4 limbs affected is pretty rare, but it's about every couple thousand babies will have like a finger or toe or something like that missing. So it's just where the limb fails to form.
So Kyle, when you were growing up, did your parents make any special accommodations for you?
Yeah, there was stuff that my dad would help. I had a bike when I was younger that he adapted so I could pedal it with my arms. Had like special spoons and things that would have attachments. So basically when I would eat, the food would go and attach to my arm and I would scoop the food up. You know, now I have a vehicle that's modified a bit. So it's basically just got lifted up and extended pedals. And it's a normal steering wheel, lifted up extended pedals. So it's pretty, try to keep things like fairly minimal. Most things now, you know, like my phone, just use like a normal iPhone. Just hit the keys with my arms and keep it pretty simple.
So you were the firstborn, then came 3 sisters who were all born with their limbs intact. What was it like growing up with 3 younger sisters?
What doesn't kill you makes you stronger, right? So they're pretty awesome girls, but they were, you know, almost in a sense like my parents tried to put the focus away from the disability, and so for them it was, you know, it was also kind of normal. You know, and there would be times and instances where my sisters, you know, we'd be out in public and see other people with disabilities, and it was like, you know, it was kind of strange. It was almost like they didn't see the disability so much. So it was like when they would see somebody else with a disability, then it was, you know, it was different. There was a kid that came to school one time, as one of my sisters was a sophomore, I believe, and she came home and told my mom, she was like, Mom, this guy came to school and he doesn't have an arm, and you know, I wonder how he does this. I wonder how he does that. And my mom was like, you do realize that your brother doesn't have arms or legs? And she was like, whoa, I didn't think about that. So it's pretty, you know, it's pretty interesting. It's like the, you know, where the attention goes, the energy flows kind of thing. So they tried to put their focus on everything that was, you know, that was normal with the situation. And it kind of, you know, redirected the energy and focus towards that.
I read in your book that when you were little, your grandmother took you out shopping. What did you learn from your grandmother?
I learned a ton from my grandma. One of the biggest things was just shaking people's hands. So basically we would go, she'd set me in the grocery cart and we'd go up and down the aisles of the grocery store together and just practice meeting people and just shaking people's hands. And she would always say, you know, as soon as people hear your voice and they see your face and they shake your hand, then the disability would fade away. She was awesome on a lot of levels, but again, it kind of comes back to just, you know, not focusing so much on the things that I couldn't do, but the things, you know, that I'd be capable of.
So she didn't make any special accommodations for you either?
She had a sugar jar too that I remember was like one of my first experiences with like really dealing with adversity. And basically, when she was cooking, the sugar jar would be setting out on the counter, and I would sit on the counter and cook with her. But I would, you know, try to scoop sugar out of the sugar jar. And so I would fit one arm inside, and I couldn't fit 2, so I could only fit 1. I would try to just pull this the sugar scooper out and balance it on the end of my arm. And you know, it was like a huge achievement just to like, you know, to pull that sugar scooper out.
Why did you choose not to wear prosthetic limbs as a kid? We
tried them. We went to the Shriners Hospital in Chicago, and they fitted me with prosthetics there. And I just remember them being super kind of bulky and awkward. They would strap all kinds of, you know, there was all kinds of straps and different, you know, connections, and, you know, the arms were long arms with hooks on the end, and, you know, had to move my arms in weird ways to open and close the hooks. So it definitely wasn't, you know, without him, it was easy just to do stuff, you know, to pick up my phone, to run around, play with my sisters, to, you know, pick stuff up and write, color, whatever I was doing, just to be a normal kid. But with the prosthetics on, it kind of limited me a lot more.
Have you ever used a wheelchair?
The wheelchair, I'm super grateful for. You know, and I would really struggle to get around places if I didn't have it. I don't have any idea how I would. In fact, I mean, you know, I could bear crawl places, but you know, I can only really do that for like short distances. So the wheelchair is like one that I'm super grateful for. Yeah, in terms of other adaptations for things, I have some stools that I use. I have a stool in my bathroom to get up to the bathroom sink. And that's about it.
Now, I think this is incredible. Even with your physical limitations, you start wrestling.
Wrestling was super difficult for a long time. It took me a long time to win a match. Lost the first 35 matches that I competed in, actually. Begged to quit. Parents wouldn't let me quit. By the time I was in 7th grade, though, was the first match that I ended up winning. And that was, you know, just kind of changed my whole perspective on life and everything, you know, possibilities, confidence, and continued to, you know, to win a lot more after that, actually. It was actually qualified to go to the state tournament in my 8th grade year, and then through high school got to wrestle in one of the top teams in the Southeast.
Now, how did wrestling boost your self-confidence?
It made an enormous difference in terms of confidence. Initially, it was super difficult from a you know, a confidence perspective. It was like, you know, it's a one-on-one sport. You're out there with your opponent, and it was, you know, if you lose, then like all of that like kind of comes back onto you, right? So all the excuses that you make going into it, or everything that you do, you know, and a lot of times in wrestling, like your brain tells you to go and do one thing, and your body just doesn't want to do it. And so it's just made an enormous difference winning, because then at that point, you know, you realize that like you put in the effort, you know, in the training and the, you know, energy and all that to be able to win and be able to succeed. So I think sports are awesome in that regard. But individual sports in particular, you know, especially like a combative individual sport, like it teaches you something unique, something really, really different.
Your book is called No Excuses. Is there a meaning behind that title?
The No Excuses motto came from my wrestling coach, actually. He said that people would complain at times, right, where they would go and say, you know, during practice, like, oh, coach, you know, my wrist hurts, my ankle hurts, and, you know, and they would want to sit out or whatever, and he would point at me and he'd say, like, I bet Kyle wishes that he had a wrist or ankle to hurt. And the kids would generally just shut up and go back to work.
So eventually you reach a point where you're not in high school anymore, and the opportunities to participate in sports aren't as open to you. So next, you write a book about your life up to that point and become a motivational speaker. How different was that?
When I first started, I was going to school to be in broadcast journalism. And then, you know, opportunities arose to go on Larry King, to write the book, to you know, just, you know, do book tours and speeches and all kinds of stuff. It was, but I never would have anticipated that would have been, you know, been my path.
All right, so now you're traveling for speaking engagements, and you're going through the airport in Washington, D.C. You meet a couple of veterans, and that sets you on another path. Back in
a time when I was going through some rough times myself, I was traveling a ton, I was speaking, I was, you know, going to different, you know, hotel rooms and cities and different places, and you know, I was doing a lot of it by myself. My friends were having a normal college experience, you know, back at home, and I felt very disconnected and detached from, you know, from my you know, group of friends, and just kind of off on my own, having this totally, you know, separate experience. And it was a really difficult time, and I was at a point where I was ready to quit the speaking. I was done, and I remember I talked to my mom on the way to the airport and told her that I was, you know, done with it. She said, you know, that's fine. If that's the case, if you want to go back to school, then you can do that. And I remember I came through the TSA screening, and there were two guys that were looking over in my direction that I could see had some bad burns. So I went over and introduced myself to these two guys. And you know, it turns out that they had been military police officers that were injured in like really badly in Iraq, and were in a really dark place themselves. And they said that that seeing my story was a big thing that like helped them, you know, get back on their feet. In a moment where I was ready to, you know, quit and give up myself and just, you know, really feeling, you know, discouraged, and then to meet those guys, it was like, you know, and to have them say that to me, it was like, wow. Sometimes I would go through and, you know, would forget that I would, you know, that the story was having an impact on people, if that makes sense. You know, we kind of forget the, like the ripple effect that like we have through, you know, different interactions, and, you know, even like the littlest things that we go into, and the, you know, the different interactions that we have throughout the day, you know, it makes a significant difference. And that one in particular was one that really, really helped me a lot. And so, which was kind of cool, because they were, you know, saying that I'd helped them, and they had no idea that when, you know, they said that to me, I went back to my hotel room that night, and I just remember, you know, was bawling, crying. I'm just grateful for the fact that they had shared that with me.
And at this point, you've done way more than anyone ever expected. Football, wrestling, MMA. And one day you wake up and say, you know what? I'm gonna be a mountain climber.
So the desire to climb mountains, a big part of it came from the fact that I wanted to go to places that my wheelchair wasn't gonna take me on my own. You know, and just Kilimanjaro in particular, you know, it was one that we could do and take on that was a doable mountain, but it, you know, it was extremely difficult, and we had to figure out how to, you know, all kinds of things to do it. It was a 1.5-year process to get there, but it was really a big part of the desire was born out of the fact that, like, when I was a kid, my friends would run off into the, you know, into the woods or you know, climb something, and I couldn't go with them, and so I wanted to be able to do that.
But when it finally came to it, your climb up Mount Kilimanjaro wasn't just for yourself. Who were you taking up to the mountain with you?
We had we had 12 of us from as American climbers on our team, a whole big group of African porters that were with us, that were local guides and porters on the mountain, which they were incredible. There was a couple of veterans that joined us on the climb, and then our guide Kevin had introduced us to someone who had just lost her son 5 months before we met her. He'd been killed in Iraq. You know, she was still grieving as we met her. She told me, you know, that if her son were still alive today, you know, that I'm sure that he would want to join us on the climb. Remember when we met, you know, it was just like a super emotional experience. You know, she was sharing about her son and saying that he, you know, had 3 little girls, you know, had this, you know, amazing spirit about him. You know, and if, you know, and he would just love to be able to help us on our journey. We wanted to make an impact on veterans that were committing suicide. At the time, it was 19 per day. She said, you know, that, you know, maybe there would be a way that he could join you on the climb. And she said, you know, ask if we would consider carrying her son's ashes.
What kind of special equipment and techniques did you have to use?
So when I started climbing, I was using super simple stuff. Basically, whatever we could find that would work in terms of like shoes, you know, bath towels, oven mitts, pot holders, leather welding sleeves, you know, would duct tape those on my arms and my feet. And then had some custom climbing gear made that was like a carbon fiber. It was kind of a carbon fiber shoe, padded on the inside, and had a Vibram shoe sole on the outside, when all strapped together in a climbing harness. And we used that to get up Kilimanjaro. And without that gear, there's absolutely no way that I would have made it.
And after days of struggling to get to the top, how did it feel when you finally reached the summit of Kilimanjaro, carrying the ashes of a soldier?
The journey and lead up to that climb was so intense, and then the summit itself was beautiful, was awesome. It was, you know, you can see deep into Africa in so many different directions, but it was a sense of, was relief that we had done it, had gotten there. On our summit day, wore the ashes on my neck. And I remember, you know, really like just feeling his spirit with us on the climb, on the journey, and being able to lay his ashes on the summit was a pretty remarkable experience, you know. And it was a promise that I'd made to her to be able to, you know, to take his ashes to the top. That was a big part of what kept me going.
So, summiting Kilimanjaro is an incredible feat for anyone. But you weren't done yet. After that, you took on Anka Gagawa.
Whoa, wait. Where's that?
In the Andes Mountains in Argentina. It's the tallest mountain in the West.
Higher than Kilimanjaro?
By 2,000 feet. So, Kyle, how did that compare to your Kilimanjaro climb?
The climb on Mount Aconcagua was a sort of a next progression, I guess, in terms of like the challenge of the mountaineering. It was more a matter of us just going out there and doing it. People that go there, like that go to climb it, are intense climbers. You know, it's definitely it's a lot more people climb on Kilimanjaro. Aconcagua is the name of the mountain, I believe, translates. It's either like gatekeeper or guardian of death or something like that. So it's, I love South America and Argentina and the location and the region that the mountain was in. We ended up spending close to a month there on the climb. My grandmother had passed. She had battled cancer for a while. You know, for me being there, especially shortly after my grandmother had passed, you know, was super special, you know, just to be there. Felt closer to her than I had in a really long time.
But you were taking on a more challenging and dangerous climb than Kilimanjaro. Did you have any close calls?
There was about 1,000 pull-ups that I had to do through this ice field. There's rock formations called ice formations called the penitentes. These ice pillars were brutal. A big part for me was to not focus so much on like the summit or destination, but to be able to focus on like the 3 feet that I would look at a time. When I'm hiking, I'm, you know, basically staring down at the dirt and the ice and the rock for like, you know, 3 feet at a time. You know, and it was a big thing was just to be able to, you know, just to appreciate the view that I had in the moment that I was experiencing it. It got to the top of that section, and it just immediately turned into like this really soft sand on like a steep incline. And so it was like a vertical treadmill, but like on quicksand. And so then, you know, got to the top of that, and then the boulder released. The rock slide on Aconcagua, I didn't actually see it, but it came, you know, there's a watermelon-sized boulder that came past me about 1.5 feet away from me. My guide, who I was attached to on a rope, stuck his trekking poles, you know, dug them in front of me. But if it had hit either one of us, then it would have taken us both off the mountain. That was kind of the psychologically just brutal of like, why the heck are we there? You know, what are we doing? I laid next to my guide, and he came and just laid next to me, didn't even say a word. I turned my head, I didn't want him to see me crying. Yeah, that night, you know, my resting heart rate was super elevated. It was going 135 beats per minute, couldn't hardly slow it down. Yeah, and it was going through a lot of that experience, like wondering what I was doing there. Had a New York Times bestselling book and successful gym and speaking business and all this stuff, and I was like, why am I there doing that? You know. And actually, you know, legitimately that night thought about quitting. You know, thought about taking a helicopter off the top. But it's, you know, we rested the next day, and then we continued on the climb after that. But it definitely, you know, those kind of moments where you have something like that happen, like it just, you know, can mess with you super, super intensely.
But you didn't give up. You kept going and eventually made it to the top. So, having climbed Kilimanjaro, how was it different to reach the top of Anka Gagawa?
I had no idea if it was going to be physically possible. It literally took everything. That was that was like a sense of like, whoa, like we'd done something that we had never, I never could have imagined or fathomed that, we had done that. We slept 5 nights above the altitude on Kilimanjaro. Just a totally different experience with that one. Both were very special in their own way, but the Aconcagua experience itself was really special.
And what personal lessons did you learn from climbing these mountains?
In a wrestling match, it's such a short and intense experience. With a mountain, it's a much different experience. It was just, it's more of a war of attrition, and slower, and grinds you out, and so you have to, just endure the experience. It teaches you, I think, more than anything, patience. The mountain itself is indifferent to you being there and being on it. So the weather and all the different things that it, that it throws at you while you're there, it's, you just gotta deal with it, right, as it goes.
Well, you've done so many different things and had so many different fantastic experiences. As you look back over it all, what do you think your purpose is in life?
I believe my purpose is probably helping other people, seek theirs. Again, I'm by no means, I've had that figured out, and I've gone through periods of being that depressed motivational speaker, right? Which is ridiculous, but it's true. But I know that the periods in time when I'm at my best in life, or when I'm, locked on and pursuing something that I want to, go after and pursue. And I think, helping other people get to that point too, is something that fuels me a lot.
Is there any advice you'd like to share with anyone watching this at home?
Yeah, I would say, you're not alone in experiencing that adversity. That life is extremely difficult and presents, so many different things and different obstacles. And a lot of times, people have different disabilities that they go through that can't be seen. It's easier to look at me and see some of the things that I've gone through, but I can't necessarily go and look at everybody else and see what they've gone through. I can't look at you and go and see the challenges that you've been through, but I know that they're there. But it comes back to that purpose question, right? Like, if we have something that we're locked onto, that we want to really take on and experience, something that makes life worth all the struggles and the crap that goes along with it to try to get to the good stuff. The more that you do that, then the more the ripple effect of that can be pretty profound.
Thank you so much, Kyle.
Hey, Kyle, thanks so much for being on the show. Incredible.
Thanks, guys, for having me on. It's been awesome.
So as Kyle's story shows us, there are times in our life where we all have to face challenges. Some are big and some are small.